So, is there something from Brazilian work culture you believe other countries should adopt?
Yeah, in Brazilian culture, it's almost mandatory that you become friends with your colleagues. it, it can be, a little challenging sometimes because you don't want to be friends with everybody. But I like it's almost like it is a sweet thing, like that you just there's this agreement that, oh, if I'm gonna spend 8 hours looking at your face, let's be friends, let's
Yeah.
go out, let's do something, let's grab a beer, and let me invite your wife and your kids to my house, let's have barbecues. And that happens very, very naturally in Brazil in
Cool.
general.
Hello and welcome to the first episode of Product Brazilian Way, the third season of Product Chronicles. I'm Joca Torres from Jaco, and I've just returned from a book tour across Europe, a journey with two main goals: to launch the English and Spanish editions of my latest book, Digital Transformation and Product Culture, and to validate or invalidate a hypothesis that's been on my mind for years, that the product challenges that we face here in Brazil and throughout all of my career, they are in fact universal. What I realize is that the language may change, the industry or level of digital maturity might differ, but the core dilemmas remain the same. How do we create real impact through product? How we align technology with strategy? And how to earn the trust to operate with autonomy. That's why I've decided to dedicate this third season of Product Chronicles to Brazilian product professionals who live or have lived abroad, to understand from their perspective what changes and what doesn't change when building products beyond Brazil. To help me on this journey, I've invited my good friend and now co-host, Fabio Duarte, a product leader who has built products in both the Netherlands and Portugal, at least from what I learned from his LinkedIn. And from our very first episode, we are flipping the script. Instead of interviewing a guest, I will be interviewing Fabio, so we can get to know his path and kick off the season in the right way. So, welcome to the podcast, Fabio. Happy to have you here as a co host of this new season and now as an interviewee.
Very, very happy to be here, Joca. Thanks for having me.
Nice, nice, cool. So let's start at the beginning. How did your journey into product management begin? And how did it take you to outside of Brazil?
Well, there's the official story, and there's the real story. So uh, I'll start with the official story because it's easier to maybe to grasp. I've I started in product. Maybe I had already 6 to 7 years working in other things. So I worked in marketing before. By the way, I'm a computer engineer. That's what I graduated in. Then I worked in marketing as a product manager, but for physical products. And then I became a IT consultant. And then I became a project manager. So I was pretty much trying to find my way into the career because I knew that I wasn't a developer. I graduated in computer engineering, realized that that's not what I want. And I have always been intrigued by building things, but not exactly how to build the thing, but rather what should I build, right? So my career was kind of based on that. Of course, looking back, I can say that I can kind of synthesize that, and in a nutshell, that's what I was doing. When I was living there, I was just zigzagging between jobs, trying to figure myself out. Um, then eventually, when I was a project manager, I developed a tool to speed up a bunch of projects that I had related to educational multimedia. I started writing some papers about the things that we developed just because I knew some people that were also writing papers and in certain periodicals. I got published in the U.S. and a few conferences started inviting me to go over there and talk about the tool that I designed. and one thing led to another, and a few years after that, I sold that technology to a Canadian company, and stayed in Brazil, developing a version for them, and eventually I moved to Canada, Montreal, and that's where I first became a product manager. That's when that was written on my business card for the first time. And over there I stayed for 3 years, and I learned pretty much what it was, about that career that I had never heard of. Of course, I was a physical product manager, but the digital didn't exist before. Then I realized that not only it started existing a few years before, and also it was the next big thing. The people in the Silicon Valley were writing about it. I was reading blogs. The famous people that right now are the old gurus, they would be like the young guys that I was reading and trying to learn from, to say, okay, am I crazy, or is this really, really exciting, really cool, and that's what I want to do with my life? Then I realized, yeah, that's a whole career path here. And in 2010, I moved back to Brazil, and I've been working in product since then. And that's the official story. So it started already outside of Brazil in 2007, where, if I'm not mistaken, of course I don't know about every single company, but I would say that digital product management still did not exist in Brazil. Maybe a few scattered initiatives, but I hadn't heard of it before. When I came back in 2010, it was already here. So there were a few invitations, like a lot of people were already looking for product managers, and there was no expertise in the market, so I was one of the only Brazilians maybe at the time that were available. And I only came back to Brazil for Carnival, was snowing like crazy in Canada, like, okay, let me go and spend my summer in Brazil. And then I realized, oh wow, there's a pretty cool ecosystem now, and everybody wants a product manager. Why don't I stay and try to help? So this is the official story. The real story, though, is that was not my first job as a product manager. It was pretty much my band. When I was a project manager, I left my career to become a musician, because I realized that nothing worked. I didn't find myself in the career. I was already 34 or 35ish, and I just realized, yeah, I don't want to do this anymore. I'm a failure. My career is going nowhere. And I was always writing music on napkins and playing guitar by myself. And I'm like, what if I just try and be a musician? But I never really, believed that could be done, until finally a band, there were some auditions, and they were looking for a new singer, and I got approved, and they invited me, okay, you have to quit your job, because it was a professional band in Brazil. And I was like, oh, no, that sounds too crazy. I was wearing a suit and tie every day, and like, how can I become a musician at this point? Is it allowed? Then I just realized, yeah, if I don't do that, I'll probably, go to my grave wondering what might have happened, right? And I finally decided to quit my job and accept the invitation. Right then, the band dissolved. they were fighting each other. I don't know what was going on there. But then the bug had already bit me, and I realized, what? I'm going to stick to my plan. I'm going to quit my job, and I write music. I'm going to try. So it was like 3 years from somebody that knew nothing about music, alternative music in the market, to traveling Brazil with my band and being featured on MTV. And that was pretty much a job that I consider my product, because I realized very soon that when you're composing, it's pure creativity and taste, right? I have no idea how to compose a hit, or what should I do when I'm writing music that would make people like my music, right? That's completely abstract. But there are a lot of very tangible aspects to be a musician, which is, do you arrive in time? Do you know how to assemble the stage? Do you have clear instructions for the light people, the sound people? So there's this whole thing around, a concert or around recording music, that you spend maybe 90% of your time doing that. And a lot of the musicians that I realized, hey, usually people are really good on top of the stage, but that other 90% of the time they're really bad. Like they're unprofessional, they don't know what to do, blah blah blah. Then I realized, hey, I can productize my band. I can make us super professional, and then the rest is completely abstract. If people are gonna like my music or not, I don't know. But I'm gonna be the best band B2B wise that I can, meaning that, whenever we play, the concert promoter will love us. The producer in the house, he will find that we are very easy to work with, and so on and so forth. So that was the plan, and I realized that worked wonders. Like my band grew very fast, not because a lot of people love their music, because it was always a niche band, but because we were so reliable as a product, right? So the festivals were inviting us, and every producer that worked with us, they were like, yeah, you're super professional, so I'd rather have you, regardless of how many people are gonna bring, because it's easier for me. And then it was really a market case, like, okay, how can I understand my audience and cater something, and kind of package my features towards that audience. And I consider that's still my one of the best things that I've ever done, product wise. So right now, designing digital products and bringing features to the market, that's the easy part, because features are very concrete, right? Music is a lot more difficult. So
And this was before or after Canada?
before.
Before, I see. And it's interesting because you realize there that not only the listeners, the audience was your client, so to speak, your user, but also the festival organizers, the promoters, they were your clients as well. They were inviting you, or even paying you to be there and to play. So you need to understand the ecosystem. Your ecosystem was not only the audience, but also the festival organizers or the promoters. That's very, very interesting. So build a product to please not only the audience, but also to be a product for that's very, very, very interesting.
Yeah, at the end of the day, a band is when you talk about live concerts, it's pretty much how an alternative band can make a living, not by selling music but selling concerts. It is a B2B market.
Yep. Yeah.
The audience must like you, yeah, of course, but um, if there are certain things, certain behaviors, that you have to have regardless of your music in order to be invited again, to an event, in order for people to consider your band as a cool band to invite. And that means things like, I don't know if people are clapping harder or not for that particular band, but they put up a good show. Like, they play well, they're well dressed, they are very polite. All of those things count. And it is B2B because the money comes from the promoters, does not come from the audience, right? It's very rare. Actually, I only got money from the audience when I was the promoter, and that also happened. So I would hire my band and rent the club, and I would get all the money from tickets. So I did that a little bit too, but it was still kind of a B2C, me promote as a promoter, and B2B, me paying my own band to be there.
Yeah.
So it is a B2B market.
Yeah, and we can see a band or a musical career as a product as well, because it's not intended to end. They don't start with an end. It must evolve and adapt according to the audience, according to the venue and all of that. So yeah, really nice, really nice. I like that. I like that. And what about the other official abroad experience that you had? That I looked into LinkedIn. You were in Netherlands and also Portugal.
Yeah, that happened later, after 10 years in Brazil. But because it was always, when I went to Canada, and I loved my experience so much. If there's somebody from Montreal listening to me, shout out to Montreal, like maybe the best city that I've ever lived in. I'm so in love with Montreal, and my time there was pretty much some of the best times in my life. And I always wanted to move to another country again, to have more of that. And I was like, yeah, North America. I studied a little bit in the U.S. as well. Lived in Canada. Why don't I go to Europe next? Why I just want to find out what's going on out there. But it was always kind of a something that I put on the back burner because the startup ecosystem in Brazil was so active and so large, right? There were so many jobs, and I was pretty much like switching jobs every year and a half, more or less. And usually, that now it's kind of a no-no. HR people are like, oh, you switch jobs a lot. Like, yeah, it was a very active market with lots of cool companies, and everybody was, raising my salary nonstop so I could go to them. Like, everybody would do the same, right? I don't know what you expected, that we become like super faithful to just one company. I was, but also regardless of your like work ethics regarding switching jobs, I'm into learning, and so whenever a company in an intriguing area would invite me, and I'm like, okay, I know nothing about this, I'm gonna go there. Let me go and learn. So in 2014, for instance, I was working with AI before it was so fashionable, and I designed 7 different products using AI to increase the conversion of e-commerce marketplaces. So when I describe it like this, and I'll sound super fancy, but I'm talking about recommendation carousels and things like that, which right now they're super available, but back then they're kind of still a hot topic. People would research that a lot, and then I became kind of an expert in e-commerce, and that's more or less what made the Europeans look at me. So eventually, Booking invited me, and I decided to move to Amsterdam, and went there. Didn't fall in love with Amsterdam in general. Then I moved to Lisbon. So after working at Booking, I worked for almost a couple of years at Farfetch, the high fashion marketplace. Was pretty cool, but just between you and me, I cared nothing about fashion. Like it was so. I knew that it was a very cool experience, but it wasn't something that I really, really wanted to stay. So eventually, I moved back to Brazil. But one thing that I knew that I wanted in Europe, and that was super interesting, and I really love the fact that I could have that opportunity, is that I wanted to go to a place where the companies were global, because that's maybe one of the major drawbacks in Brazil. The Brazil market is so big, it's such a huge country, and everybody speaks the same language, like Portuguese, which almost nobody else speaks, that 99% of the companies are just Brazilian. And we don't even explore Latin America, and I understand why, right? If you put, I don't know, Argentina, Mexico, and maybe a third largish country, you're gonna increase your market by, I don't know, 10 to 15% maybe, and it's a lot of effort because you have to translate everything into Spanish. You have to have local agents on your customer service, and you have to have a sales people in your countries. So usually Brazilian companies are not that interested. I would say that's because of that. The market, even if Brazil is more or less 70% of Latin America alone. So people go like, oh, it's a lot of effort to maybe we increase our market, more, I don't know, 40% maybe if I'm very, very lucky. And oh yeah, you can always translate to English and go, yeah, and you go and your competition all of a sudden comes from America. And most Brazilian companies will go like, no, we're fine.
Rather not. Yeah, rather not.
We don't have enough dollars to go and compete with the American giants. So I would say that it's very rare that in Brazil you would have like real international experience. And I was just like describing the reasons why I think that is, because I know that might be super interesting to whoever's listening to this podcast. So I moved to Europe to have that, and yeah, that's what I had. Like Booking and Farfetch, they sell pretty much in every country of the world. Like several different languages, more than 10 different languages, the translations, and at Farfetch would say things like, let's A/B test this in Zimbabwe first, and and shout out to people from Zimbabwe because you are the test bed, my favorite test bed for things that I that I would launch. You had all the first launches of every feature, because in Zimbabwe they speak English, right? And the country is small enough that if something is wrong, we can still correct it. So, and I was like, yeah, that's super cool. Like, and then you have to deal with China, right? Where you have to have servers in China because the internet will be closed, and you have to have your own infrastructure in China, and and even you have to give people over there some independence because the front end is very very different. You know, the way that they interact with products will be very different. So it's not just a matter of translating. So all of those challenges, they were what I was looking for, and I had a lot of this. And then I kind of said, yeah, I'm starting to not learn as much. Like, I believe that I got what I wanted. Time to move back to Brazil and bring my expertise to Brazil.
Nice, nice. That's really nice. I remember I had two experience working in global companies. The first one is when I sold my internet service provider I had back in the 90s. I sold to an American company, and then I started to work for this American company, and I had a global position. Actually, it was the first time, this back in the 90s, that I was a product director. I had a product title, but I was reporting to marketing, and my mission was to, from the all acquired companies, to build a common portfolio of products, and doesn't look like a patchwork, but look like a consistent, product portfolio. So that was my first experience back in 2000 and actually 1998, 1999 until 2004, 2005. And but that was working for an American company. And the second experience was in Gympass. In Gympass, it actually is one of the exceptions of what you said. It's a Brazilian company conquering, so to speak, the world, right? They started with Mexico, and then they went to Spain. Now they are in the US. They have a broader presence in Europe and in Latin America as well. And it was actually very, very interesting. And one thing that was really, I found that really, really interesting is to work with people from different countries and consequently from different cultures. They operate differently, they think different, they approach problems different. How do you notice this type of differences, and how do you use to deal with this type of situations?
Yeah, first with frustration, but then you learn, right? Um, but but I consider that it is part of the skill set for a product person to learn how to be more and more empathic. You know, we have to. It's not optional. So maybe if you're a developer, you know, you don't need as much empathy. You can kind of, you know, do your thing and keep communication to a minimum, right? If you loved working in product, you have to communicate like nonstop, and you kind of have to drive people to do what you think is best in some way. Kind of similar to the British people, super formal, you know. So everybody have their own traits, and so it is
The
really
Dutch being the Dutch being very, very transparent. That shocked me a lot when I had to
yeah.
deal with Dutch, and you worked with booking people. I believe you had this uh, very, very transparent and very candid and very direct to the point.
Yeah, yeah, but I would say that it shocked me more in the streets because at booking I was working with Ukrainians, Romanians,
Oh, okay.
Polish, Brazilians, Argentinians, and that's it. Like no Dutch at all.
Really? Wow.
And I was in the internal departments, you know, developing internal products. I was in the continuous integration.
Okay.
So I was dealing pretty much with the IT people, and yeah, maybe the Dutch were more in other parts of the company. Like it's a lot of people, right? Thousands of employees. So, but no, my group, they were all foreigners, and I have still like a good friend, a PM that worked like on the next desk from me, and he's Egyptian. Like yeah, nobody was Dutch. But still, some of those guys would be super direct. Some of those guys would be the opposite of direct, like super, you know, full of very measured words, and you have to kind of get on the same wavelength. And so I consider that it is part of your job. You know, it is part of your. I'm earning my salary to learn how to communicate with that person, regardless of how difficult it is. So I would say that anyone that's working with foreigners, you know, whatever country you are from, keep that in mind. Like, people do not have the same standards and signifiers of communication that you would have. You know, the same rituals. It's all going to be very, very different, and it's very hard for us to remember that on a daily basis, because you're doing, I don't know, a daily meeting, and you say good morning, and maybe somebody won't say good morning, and maybe in somebody's culture that's going to be super impolite, and and other people will think nothing of it, you know, like, yeah, whatever, you know, good morning, yeah, yeah, just a salutation, and yeah, you can do it or not, and it's going to be totally cultural. And I'm just giving a kind of a toothless example, but sometimes it can get a lot worse. You know, when you're discussing an idea, and then somebody is going to be super blunt, and somebody is not going to see your point at all because they do not come from the same place. So I consider that it is a continuous effort to meet the person where they are. I'm not saying that I became an expert at this, but definitely I got better. You know, because it's almost like survival mode. You realize, oh wow, one of my major tools of my trade, which is communication, is not working anymore. You know, everything that I thought I knew on how to communicate very well, with that guy, you know, it just doesn't work. So let me sit down and understand what's going on, and it takes a while, but it is something that I understand that I have to make a conscious effort. I would say that that's the best step that you can do. Like, make a conscious effort. You know, if you're feeling frustrated, blame yourself. Just say, I didn't work enough, you know, to be on the same wavelength as that person. So it is very, very interesting, because it becomes a superpower once you get better at this. And after I came back to Brazil, I was working as a head of product for a British company, and there was a pretty cool episode where a lot of people, they were super frustrated with a developer from Russia, and that guy was being super annoying as well. You know, on Slack, like complaining about everybody. And eventually, for some reason, he was here in Brazil for some meetings or something like that. He was over there in São Paulo. I live in Rio de Janeiro, by the way. And I got a plane, and I invited him for a burger. You know, like, okay, I'm meeting you, man. I want to know more about you. Turns out he wasn't even Russian. He was a Ukrainian. He had lost his house. Yeah, he was a refugee in Poland, and but he comes from a culture of no bullshit, right? Like, if you say you're gonna do something, do it, and if you didn't do it, it's gonna generate a lot of frustration. And he completely opened his heart, and we had such a cool talk. It was so cool to learn about his reality, and such a harsh reality on top of it, right? And it's so good that I just got that plane, because I wasn't his boss. You know, I was the boss of the PMs, but you know, he was the developer lead, and we really bonded. And after that, it was completely different, a relationship that he started having with the team. You know, because he wanted to be heard, and sometimes that's all it takes. That people see that you're making an effort to listen, to take things in before replying, right?
Yeah. Nice, nice. And do you believe, is there anything from the Brazilian culture or from the Brazilian way of being, you know, that may have helped you during this multicultural scenario?
Definitely, and also, you know, things that get in the way. Like, it's fun to say that I'm not only Brazilian. I'm from Rio de Janeiro, which is a very peculiar place, like, where people are super informal, you know, very, very full of slang, very blunt. Like, there's almost no work formality. You're almost the same in an office that you are outside of the office. So Rio de Janeiro people can be tricky to deal with, you know, because sometimes the humor is going to be over the top and out of place, and your people kind of don't care. I don't know much about, I don't know how New Yorkers are, but every time I see, the stereotype for a New Yorker, I kind of say, that might be similar to Rio. So that very informal way of stating things and not really caring about work rituals, that definitely got in the way with more strict cultures, so that was the bad part. But the good part is that Brazilians in general, and of course people, we're totally generalizing cultures here, which is always a little bit tricky to do, right? But I mean, it's easier to talk about those things if we generalize. Okay, so there's going to be exceptions, and there's always that caveat. But I would say that in general, Brazilians are super creative and they question authority a lot, and that could be bad, but that this is also good. Like Brazilians, they won't do something in general because the boss said so. It is not our culture. People from outside of Brazil, please know that, and you can use that in your favor even if you're a boss, because Brazilian employees, they will tend to think about what you're saying and they will question it if needed in general. Okay, and that's very very powerful because you can either become a nemesis of your boss if he can't take any kind of criticism, or you can become a very very valuable member of the team because they know that you'll be thinking about things and studying them and bringing some important questions. And when I was there in booking, I could see other Brazilians, like the role was most of the Brazilians, they were very very respected because of that. I could see that we kind of had that in common. Bring some hard question into the table, doing it in a polite way. Of course, they're a way less blunt than the Dutch that you just said. Yeah, the Dutch, they like to be very transparent. Brazilians, I would say they're sweeter maybe when they're questioning, but still they will question nevertheless. And Brazilians like to think for themselves. So if you are the boss of a Brazilian, you're gonna do way better explaining why and explaining the logic of what you want them to do than telling them, a direct order, I need you to do this. Like you're not going to extract the best. So in several of the startups, I would say that there's not a lot of orders, right? It's all scrappy. It's all a little bit. People are figuring out what to do. Even when you go to a super giant, a scale up with thousands of people, still you're not working as a monolith of 1,000 people, right? There's several groups, and each group is kind of at their own pace, and each group is kind of figuring out how they should progress in that larger ecosystem. So I could see the Brazilians becoming like very very interesting assets there.
That's that's interesting to hear. I've noticed that as well. And actually, what we are talking about is culture, right? Culture is the way that people behave. And I remember that when I was at Gympass, we even decided to read, as a company, to read a book called The Culture Map. I don't know if you know this book, The Culture Map. The subtitle is Decoding How People Think, Lead, and Get Things Done Across Cultures by Erin Meyer. It's a very, very good book, and I remember it helped me because many things I realized during my time at the American company, but was very through experiments, oh, so this is the way Dutch operate. I see. So I need to adapt to work with them. French are a little bit different, and then we have the British, as you said, and then there's the American. So we need to, but it was more on a trial and error, so to speak. But when I was at Gympass, we made this conscious effort to read this book and discuss among us to understand, because we have people from everywhere as well, and it was really good to understand and understand how Brazilians play a role in this type of culture map. That's really interesting. And now being more specific to product building or product discovery, product delivery, anything that you could point as a difference on looking into discovering a problem, discovering a solution, or even delivering a product on the product development as a whole. Do you see anything different in the Brazilian way of doing products, building products?
I'm not going to say that it's like different from everybody else, okay? Because I'm gonna say some things that everybody's gonna kind of agree, like, oh yeah, but every good product team should have that. But I will say that in many of my experiences abroad, I didn't see a lot of that in other groups, okay? But I could see Brazilian excelling at those, which are specifically being creative. Like it usually the Brazilian PMs or Brazilian designers, like they would bring lots of solutions to one single problem. Like they there is that love of spending time creating more, like giving more ideas. Maybe you could do this, and 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 it comes with what also comes in the package that I'd like to highlight is that in general, I would say the Brazilians are not afraid of questioning the way it's done. So it's not, oh, Amazon does it like this, so let's do it. Why? We can invent our own way, which sometimes can be reinventing the wheel, but sometimes can be important. So I would say that's one of the traits that I saw. Usually would be a Brazilian that would bring something very disruptive. Like, it's funny. It has something to do with what I said earlier of questioning authority. Maybe Brazilians maybe they're super cynical. We don't care about the way things have been done until now. We're not conservative by heart. So I would say that every adoption in Brazil of new technologies is really fast. Like people really they're not attached to the old ways, right? And I don't know if I'm too optimistic about this being a Brazilian trait, but I like to think it is. I don't know what you think, Joca.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I agree. We tend to be quite creative in general. Actually, we have to, living in Brazil, we have to be creative to solve some things because sometimes we don't have access to better ways of solving things. So we need to, what we call in Portuguese, the famous gambiarra, we need to figure out some way to solve it somehow, so yeah, I tend to agree with you. This is that there is always a good part of this, which is being creative,
Yeah,
but sometimes we may be seen as people that don't follow
yeah,
strictly the rules,
yeah.
have the Brazilian way of doing things. So that's something to pay attention. But I tend to agree with you, and we are getting to our closing. But one thing that I would like to ask you a final question prior to our quick fire round. I hope you had prepared for a quick fire round.
I didn't, but let's see what.
What comes out. Okay, cool. But prior to that, just a final question that I would like to ask you. Is there any one lesson from your international career that you think more Brazilian product people should be aware of, should embrace?
Well, there's one thing that is unfortunately it's still stronger outside of Brazil than in Brazil, which is uh, being led by metrics. You know, and I don't know why that is. Maybe it's even related to people being super creative and they want to invent their own stuff, and maybe it's all part of the package. But I would say that in Europe and also in North America, if you don't bring metrics to data, to the table, your opinion are almost worthless unless, of course, you're the CEO. In Brazil, that's not so. People are so in love with their own opinions, and there's so many very long brainstorms leading nowhere, right? And you have all of those post-its, and you have after that like 30 different ideas and no direction. And sometimes your data will clear out a direction in such a I don't know, emphatic way, in such a clear way that leaves no room for other discussion. and I became really in love with data, and I worked a lot over there with conversion funnels and things like that. I was looking at spreadsheets and doing SQL, queries all the time. I'm still like this. I'm still completely in love with data because I understand that it takes hours of meetings away from my life, which is always a good thing. So I can just only bring numbers and end of discussion. I'd rather work like this, and I would say that the Brazil is not there yet. Like a lot of Brazilian, both PMs and stakeholders, they would be in love with their own ideas, and even if you bring data, sometimes it's kind of wow, yeah, there's this data, but there's more. I'm like, no, there's nothing else. If the data is saying this is the truth. All the rest is in your head, right? And of course you can misuse data. That's another discussion, okay? But just to clear my point is like, yeah, imagine you have like perfect data that really tells a story. Sometimes Brazilians will not go after that. They will be discussing and having that rhetorical discussion, trying to win with the best arguments, because we're so in love with discussing ideas. I'm not in love with that, and I'm really grateful for being outside of Brazil to learn how to be different.
That's nice. So let's take more attention to data and use data in our decisions. That's a very important point. So
We can do it.
yeah, we definitely can. We definitely that should and can. Cool. Quick fire round. Are you ready, Fabio?
Of course. Yeah.
Let's go. Let's go. So just say the first thing that comes to mind. So
Okay.
first one, Brazilian food you miss the most.
Rice and beans.
That's a good one. That's a
I
good one.
love it. I have it every day.
Yeah. That's a good one. One Brazilian habit you've kept during your time abroad.
Long lunches. Lunch is the most important meal, guys. I don't care what you say.
It's a social thing, right?
It
It's
is.
important for Brazilians. Yeah.
It is. Sometimes I can spend 2 hours. Not anymore, but when I moved, the first year in Canada, I would spend like an hour and a half, 2 hours having lunch easily. And the Canadians would go like, Fabio, you're crazy. Like,
Yeah.
no, come on. This is the only way to eat. Like, I can't eat if it's not like this.
Eat them and socialize and talk to
Exactly.
people.
I would take everybody. Like, oh, no, long lunch, Fabio. Yeah, let's go. So we do it on Fridays, but they knew that if they went out to have lunch with me, would be talking more than eating. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. The biggest misconception about Brazilians in tech.
That's a good one because I'm not sure how people saw me. Sometimes I would see people looking at me funny. Sometimes I could read the people that they were thinking funny things about me or about some of the Brazilian engineers, but it's not like they would say out loud, right? But I can only say something regarding my own interpretation, and there is this weird image that Brazil has that I don't know. Maybe China suffers a little bit of this because Brazil is a super modern country. It's super Western, and university here is really, really, really good. Like, and especially the free university. So education here, not a lot of people have access to education because of other factors. But we have from middle class up, we have like extremely well educated people and very, very clever and resourceful people, and probably more modern than the average European. Modern by I mean in touch with new technologies, in touch with new trends, and Brazilians are really, really trendy. And but I would say that that's not the image that we have. Sometimes I would feel that they feel that we're kind of a folklorical, people that would be dancing in the streets naked, and that too, right? We maybe we do that too, but there are incredible talent and brains here, and maybe people are not aware of this.
Yeah, cool. So, is there something from Brazilian work culture You think, you believe other countries should adopt?
Yeah, Brazilian in Brazilian culture, it's almost mandatory that you become friends with your colleagues. it, it can be, a little challenging sometimes because you don't want to be friends with everybody. But I like the it's kind of it's almost like it is a sweet thing, like that you just there's this agreement that, oh, if I'm gonna spend 8 hours looking at your face, let's be friends, let's go out, let's do something, let's grab a beer, and let me invite your wife and your kids to my house, let's have barbecues. And that happens very, very naturally in Brazil in general. And yeah, it is something that the rest of the world could learn, because in the other countries that I've been, I would invite people and they would feel super awkward. They're like, oh, you're inviting me? Oh, you could see that they did not know how to react. And I'm like, you can just say no, but like it's okay. But
Yeah.
I'll keep inviting though. And I made loads of friends there. When finally people, they kind of, yeah, that's his attitude. He's gonna keep inviting to stuff, and then finally when they feel ready to, they open up. But no, in Brazil, like everybody, if you're a foreigner and come to work in Brazil, people will be pushing hard to be your friends like from day one, and you have to learn how to deal with that. But I find it super cool, because it humanizes a lot your colleagues.
Makes the road easier.
I would say so.
Yeah, and something you wish more Brazilian product teams would adopt from abroad. You already mentioned the metrics. Something else?
Yeah, a little bit more of formality, maybe. um, it's not uncommon here that you have like 3 hour meetings resolving nothing, and nothing gets done after. No action plan, no nothing. Like people just talk, and I came to a point where I just considered that meetings is not work, and that's not a Brazilian thing. Like Brazilians love meetings. They feel that well, let's join and discuss this because this is too important. We have to stop what we're doing. Let's discuss. Invite more people. All of a sudden there's like 10 people talking about whatever comes to their minds. I just That's one part that I hate in Brazilian culture. Like no
Maybe
more.
because we are too social. We want to be too much
Exactly.
friends.
But that's exactly it. I
On the bad
completely
side.
agree with that. It is the social thing, kind of powering into a work, and which is good. But that part I don't love, I'm more a get shit done guy. If you're part of my French, I'd rather we just, oh, what do we have to do? This, okay, let me do it. You don't need to call me again. You don't need to ask me how I'm doing. I'm doing it. I'm doing it. Just trust me. I don't need weekly meetings or daily meetings or whatever Brazilians do. But yeah, we love to talk, even though we're not uh, helping the work progress.
Cool. And to close, that's a good one. One Brazilian book, movie, or series you would recommend to help people understand our culture.
Okay, I'm gonna say, but it is very niche, right? Because this is the part where we're trying to talk about the Brazilian way, and I hope that the things that I'm talking about will be kind of Brazil in general will identify with that. But now we have to say that it is a huge country. It is larger than the U.S. if the U.S. didn't have Alaska. It is larger than almost all of Europe without Russia, and it is huge. So there are so many cultures, right, Joca? Like you
Yeah.
travel 400 kilometers and you're still within state lines, and but already culture starts changing. The language starts changing a little bit. The accents are crazy all over the country. The food changes completely. So it feels like a continent. So I'm gonna say things that will make me feel that, oh, this is super me, but those will be related to Rio de Janeiro. Like there's no way around it. Okay, so I would say that if you really want to understand the Rio de Janeiro, how it operates, there is a very horrible, violent movie called Elite Squad that it is absolutely how I grew up. Like I just, they even filmed that in my university, and parts of it, the classrooms were exactly where I was having classes, and the way they showed, the rich kids buying drugs. Like I was like, yeah, I saw that. I saw how that works. I saw how police works in Rio. It's a horrible, violent movie, but really, really interesting, showing a very complicated part of our history, regarding the fact that the police here is still a military organ. It's not civil. They all respond to military hierarchies, and they are part of the military forces, the armed forces of Brazil. And that changes completely, the relationship of with police with civilian population, and how that started back then. City of God, it's another movie that kind of shows that in the 70s, and Elite Squad shows that more or less in the 90s to 2000, and I don't know, I don't believe that a single person that grew up in Rio de Janeiro wouldn't look at that movie and just say, yeah, that's horrible, but yeah, it's almost like a documentary. So I don't know if that's a good. In, I'm not. I don't know if I should advise people to watch this or not. But if you're into very intense, police thrillers with lots of people dying by gunshots, yeah, that's your movie.
Okay. Cool. Elite Squad. So, Elite Squad. Nice.
Yeah.
Great. That ends up our quick fire round. Thank you so much. And Fabio, it was amazing to hear your story, and we set the tone for what's coming next in the season. That's very nice.
Yeah, I'm very, very happy to kickstart that with you, Joca, and I hope that was interesting to whoever is listening to us out there. I hope you didn't mind our beautiful accents. That's also a very Brazilian thing, we have accents, and we're proud of the accent as well.
Yeah, definitely. Great. And to everyone listening, stay tuned. We will be back soon with more insights from Brazilian product people around the globe. So see you next time in Products Brazilian Way. Thank you.
Bye.